Good evening. It is 5 p.m. We are waiting for a full quorum of the board. In doing so, we will have a 10-minute delay in our start time. Good evening. It is 5:10, and we are calling this work session to order. Welcome. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this special meeting is a working session to discuss the Finance and Human Resources 2024-2025 update. At this time, we'll take a roll call for attendance. I will call each board member's name, and if they're present, they will say present. Director Song and Vice President Farrer are both absent and excused. Director Cook?
Present.
Director Clark?
Present.
And I am present. So as we begin our work session for our Finance and Human Resources for 2024-2025 update, I call upon Superintendent Bella.
Thank you, President Margell. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Raul Parangal, Executive Director of Finance, and Mr. Damon Hunter, our Associate Superintendent of Human Resources, to begin our presentation tonight. Gentlemen.
President Margell, member of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry, good evening. Tonight we're going to provide you with a short presentation, and I will start off by providing enrollment update. And so we provided you with slides, and starting with the enrollment slide, you will see that there are information about the historical view from 2019-20 all the way to 23-24, and those are the blue bars. And you can see here that from 2019-20 all the way to 23-24, we have been experiencing a decline in our enrollment. When we projected 24-25, we were a little bit more optimistic, and that's why you see a slight increase of 7 students. But then once we tally the first month of enrollment, you notice a drop. And so when we look at the comparison between 23-24 and 24-25, our enrollment dropped by 284 students instead of increasing by 7. And so that was a swing of about 291 students. That represents about 1.2% drop. You'll also notice that the enrollment has been declining for the last 5 years at an annual average of about 1.5%, or 379 students. And from 2019-20 fast forward to the current year, we've lost about 1,801 students from 2019-20 onwards. When we look at the enrollment by grade span, you see here that the kindergarten has been dropping at about 2.5% rate year by year, about 54 students on the average. Grades 1 to 5 at 1.7%, or about 172 students on the average. Grades 6 to 8, 2.1%, at about 134 average per year. And grades 9 to 12 were actually flat. So if you look at our numbers from 2019-20 and our numbers today, they're exactly the same for our grades 9 to 12. When we look at the projected versus actual enrollment, because when we present to you the budget in August, we're operating on a base on projection. And at the end of the year, we had an opportunity to compare how we did and how we did our projection. You'll notice that the average margin of error for the last 5 years was about 2.1%, or about 516 students. But I think it's, when you look at the chart, you will notice that there's a big gap in 2021 and 21-22 during the pandemic years. Those were times where projecting enrollment was really very difficult and uncertain, and that's why you see the gap. And if we were to exclude those 2 years in the mix, our margin of error is about 1%. And this is kudos to our Director of Budget, Lisa Tyler, who is here behind me, who is actually very, very accurate in her enrollment projection. And so I think the significance of that is when we present to you the budget in August, you could almost rest assured that the enrollment projection is close to accurate, within 1% error rate. The variance in 24-25 is 1.2%. And so if you just look strictly at 24-25, you will see that our error rate or our variance is about 1.2% or about 291 students, as I mentioned on the earlier slides. When we look at our enrollment by program, you see here that the 5-year average for each of the program, from Running Start to multilingual education, our average for Running Start is 892, and you will look at the multi-MLE is about 6,323. Comparing it to our projection, we projected 970 for Running Start and 7,869 for our MLE. This enrollment numbers right here are quite volatile. We are still tallying them month after month, and there's a lot of variation that is happening throughout the month. For example, our IE are still continuing to do IEP, and so those numbers are potentially going to change by the next time we run our update. Our MLE are still identifying children, and they're still exiting students, and so there are pluses and minuses that are going to happen throughout the year. And so it would be very interesting to look at these numbers in the upcoming months when we provide the updates. So at this point, I'm going to pass this presentation to Damon.
Thank you, Raul. Happy Wednesday, President Margell, members of the board. This evening, HR will present on the link between student enrollment and staffing, our continued focus on year-round recruiting as well as retention, data on the various substitute pools in KSD, update on collective bargaining, and an update on our partnership and collaboration with the Kin Educators of Color as well as the affinity groups. As per usual, at the end of the presentation, we will be available to answer any questions. At this time, I will turn it over to Jamie Frazier, Director of HR Operations.
Next slide. Perfect. All right. Okay, so thank you very much. As we dive into the staffing as it relates to enrollment projections and then moving into actuals, this first slide represents our basic ed classroom FTE. So comparing last year allocations to this year allocations just for basic ed classrooms, and it doesn't include our title and lap, our inclusive education, or our MLE student projections or FTE. We had a 66.0 FTE reduction from last school year actuals to this school year actuals. That represents, let's see here, K through 5, 36 FTE, 6 through 8 for our middle school, 11 FTE reduction. At the high school, it was 16 FTE, and the academy was 3.0 FTE, and that was specifically at the Kent Lab Academy. And just for comparison, last year we reduced, during this conversation last year, 54.6 FTE. So you see that continued step down of basic education staffing as we move towards our current enrollment numbers. Next slide. All right, and this slide is representative of other staffing other than basic ed classroom. So a few that I wanted to highlight were certificated staffing for inclusive education, 6.6 FTE increase there. We're increasing in our multilingual education at a similar rate. And then you'll see that 14.5 FTE for CTE. That represents a shift if we reduce in the basic ed classroom. This FTE supports adding additional classes for students to take at the high school level to kind of offset that reduction. It provides additional class options for them, if you will. For our clerical staffing, it stayed pretty much the same this school year. We had 1 year with 6th grade moving up to consider clerical staffing at the middle school level. With that, we did see a need to increase 10.5 hours spread across our middle schools, and as well as our academy, and that 6 hours represents added hours at top. And then paraeducator staffing, this is where you'll see the continued fluctuation of hours increase. You'll see inclusive education has 215.45 hour increase. That's about 33 paraeducators. This is a snapshot of at the end of September. So it continues to fluctuate as students continue to be identified for services, test in for MLE or test out. And then multilingual education, 3.5 hours, and a decrease in MLE for paraeducators as well as CTE paraeducator hours. Next slide. And this one helps describe how we transfer our staff around the district. This spring, our IVT in the spring, we had another large IVT of 66 individuals. No correlation to the 66 FTE reduction, it just happens to be the same number. 3 volunteers and 63 involuntary as we work to settle our staffing across the district. And then we did run another fall IVT this year with 6 participants. I believe we had 7 last year, so it might have been 1 less, with 2 volunteers and 4 involuntary. Those individuals were notified by September 11th, so they were communicated to their new assignment and they were settled into their new roles by September 17th. And I will pass it along to Irene Aguilar to talk about demographics of applicants.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon. The first slide here I wanted to show is the applicant demographics. So in February, March of this year, we transferred over to a new system for applicants. And one of the nice things about it is that it's able to give us an EEOC report where it shows us the demographics of our staff that have been applying. Another neat tool that it has also is, for example, if we're at a recruitment event, I can see day by day what the number of applicants, the number of applications that are coming in, to be able to see those spikes whenever we have any recruitment events. Next slide. So then here I wanted to show you also the new employee demographics. So this was, again, a snapshot as of the last Friday of September, just what the demographics look like for new hires for this year. This is by different labor groups. Next slide. And then also the active staff demographics. So this is all staff here in the Kent School District. Just another snapshot of what our demographics look like. So these are the different metrics that we collect just year by year. Next slide, please. So we also have a tool, it's called a retention dashboard that was created for HR a few years ago. I know it's small, but what it shows is it's basically a snapshot each October after the S275 report is submitted to OSPI. So it's a snapshot in October after that report is submitted. So as of the 23-24 school year, we were at 86% for overall staff retention. We actually have a group in our research and evaluation that they're working on the data for this year. But then we also are able to capture where all staff retention are by demographic groups and ethnicity. So the attrition was 14%. Next slide. I also wanted to make sure that we pulled out the certificated and our classified staff just so that you could see this information as how it relates to the different labor groups. So we're also able to pull out that information. So it was 86% for overall staff retention, but 87% for our certificated staff and 82% with our classified staff. So we know that there is more turnover with our classified staff, especially our paraeducators. Similar to what our colleague Raul had mentioned, you can see the highest point on this graph was for overall staff, and for these two groups was the 1920. So that's when COVID hit. We were one of the only districts around us that were not letting employees go, and we continue to hire during that period. As just the COVID mandates were easing up. Again, just if you all remember, a lot of people were not selling their homes, they were not moving. So once those regulations eased up, then we saw more turnover because then our members were able to move on to what they were holding on during COVID. So next slide. We also are able to capture demographics, the retention demographics by percentage, but then at the top, it also shows you the numbers of demographics. So the retention is really captured by labor group. So for example, we might have 1 year where our numbers might go down for example, paraeducators. But they could have gone to another labor group. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not retaining them in Kent. We have a personal report where some of that information is being captured, but they could be under a paraeducator cap group in 1 year, and then they have graduated. Now they're a certificated employee, so now they're in the other labor group as well. So next slide. So going on to, or continuing with this year, I wanted to also be able to show what our open positions data information is. Again, this is a snapshot from the last Friday of September. So we were at 65 IE para open positions. Those open positions are filled with agency staff or substitute. The last number that I have is that we hired a total of 64 agency IE paras. Again, if any of those are absent, then our substitutes would be able to pick those positions up. Same thing, 8 IE teachers. We have 1 IE agency, and then the rest are picked up from substitutes. We really went around adopting the concept of year-round recruitment. So you see here, we recruit all year long. Aside from the information that you see here, we're in the fall, so one of the things that we're working on is the postcards. So last year, we sent out 64,380 postcards to our residents. That's something that's going to be happening again this year. Aside from what you see up there, we also attend student events. For example, Kentwood and Kent Lake, they're going to have their career fair for the juniors and seniors on November 5th. We'll be attending that event as well, going out to the high schools to be able to talk to our own students, to tap into the diversity of our classrooms, as well as PSESD. I always join them in for their career event as well for BIPOC educators. And then for retention, we have in-person employee orientations. We partner with the Kent Educators of Color Network. And then we have employee recognitions. So next slide. Here's another snapshot, once again, from the last Friday of September. So this is certificated positions in the 23-24 school year to open positions in the 24-25 school year, as well as a comparison from last year for our paraeducator open positions. This is the same day, just the different years. And our paraeducators open positions for the 24-25 school year. So we had for paras about 20 less, and then again also less this year for teacher or certificated open positions than last year. So next slide, please. Another comparison that I wanted to show you tonight was first day of school last year versus first day of school this year. So last year, we have the open IE paraeducator positions on the first day of school versus this year. It was also lower. For the total field sped or IE paraeducator positions, we had about 20 more paras that we had hired the first day of school this year versus last year. Those numbers are also there for non-IE para positions. For the first day of school last year to the first day of school this year. Something that I also wanted to notate that both of my colleagues have shared is if you see the total, the bottom left, the total open IE paraeducator positions. So for example, on August 28, you see that we had 58 open positions, and then September 27th, we had 65. That again is due because we have students enrolling, they are going through the process of being evaluated for those programs. So as Jamie mentioned, just if they are evaluated and we see that we need more FTE, then that's added, which opens up positions. So we continue to enroll throughout the year. Enrollment doesn't stop at our schools, and so if FTE will fluctuate, it's a little bit different than our certificated positions where those positions fluctuate up and down depending on the need. Okay, next slide. This is just an overall picture of some of our events. I try to take different members with me to these events. We were at Kent Cornucopia this year all 3 days, met over 500 members from our community and other surrounding communities, and it was just a pleasure to be out there. With that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Anita McPherson.
Thank you. And transitioning from Irene's sharing of open positions as we start the year, one of the main services our substitute service office can support is staffing for those vacancies or medical leaves. So in this slide, we just wanted to start off by sharing that at the beginning of this year, we have approximately 19 guest teachers who are filling long-term vacancies. We're expecting that to be 19 by the October payroll. Just to let you know, long-term is not, or a sub is not considered long-term until they have been in a position for 20 consecutive days. So sometimes we have situations in which people are reaching long-term or falling out of long-term status. That could be because a teacher is returning to their position, or it could be because our at-will employees have decided to not continue in that position for some reason. Of the 19 positions, just some additional data. 11 staff have already reached that long-term status as of the beginning of October. So just to kind of give you a stance on where we're at with these different roles. 6 of the positions are inclusive ed teaching positions. 9 are providing coverage due to leaves, whether that be medical, family, or L&I leaves. And 10 are specifically in unfilled positions that a guest staff member is taking. Next slide. Here's a snapshot of our guest teacher, para, and clerical pools for the last 3 years. So in 22, 23, and 24, as you can see, we have very healthy pools, and they've been increasing since our COVID times. We have had some of the largest payroll runs at the end of last year, and we have a large active guest teacher, guest para, and clerical pools. We're very thankful for our amazing guest staff. One of the biggest increases, as you may see here, is our guest para educator pool. Next slide. That transitions into our daily fill rate. So this is a snapshot of the first 20 days, and that shows us the 23-24 school year data, and then this year, the 24-25 school data. So as Irene shared, with having fewer openings overall for certificated and classified positions, we don't need as much fill rate. And then we also have the very healthy active pool. So we do see a higher overall all positions fill rate for this school year compared to last school year, with the most significant increase being in our paraeducator group. And with that, I'll be passing it to Director Benedetti for our labor updates.
Workforce, I have the wrong one. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Anita. And so I'm starting just with pictures because they really tell the story. We had just 2 open contracts for this year, and that was Kent Education Association for our teachers, and that is a picture of the night that we TA'd the agreement, and that's both bargaining teams, both KEA and KSD intermingled there. Very good bargain. And we finished at 9:15 the day after school ended in June. The other contract also finished by the end of June was Teamsters, representing our bus drivers and assistants. Next slide. Just a couple of facts about those 2 agreements. I mentioned completed prior to the end of June 2024, 85% ratification vote from KEA and a 3-year contract term, kind of the salient points. And then with Teamsters, also completed, as I mentioned, before the end of June, overwhelming ratification vote from Teamsters, and that was a quote from the Teamsters rep who said overwhelming ratification from Teamsters, and also a 3-year contract term, which settles it for 3 years. Next slide. So what's coming up? This year and expiring at the end of the school year. We have 6 collective bargaining agreements. AFT, American Federation of, I'm sorry, the AFSME first, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. And that is a group of our information tech employees that had their very first contract 2 years ago. They're brand new. And then the American Federation of Teachers, which is our custodial and maintenance, our coaches contract, the Kent Association of Paraeducators, the Kent Association of Educational Office Professionals, and the Kent Principals Association. So all 6 of those will be expiring and will be negotiated prior to next school year. And I will turn it back over to my colleague Irene Aguilar.
Thank you, Christine. So wrapping us up with affinity groups. There it is. So last year, we presented just on the work that we were doing around affinity groups. So last year, we really started with the concept of listening and learning. From goal 4 of a strategic plan, we were reaching out to the different affinity-like groups here in Kent just to learn more about what they were doing, what type of work they were doing, and how we could support. The Kent Educators of Color was one of those groups that we just took the time to listen and learn all of the wonderful things that they were doing. So that was last year. Last year, it was also building that trust because the trust wasn't there, building the relationship. So this year, we were able to start the year running with a partnership. Mr. Hunter and myself met with 9 of the members from the Kent Educators of Color Network at the beginning of the year. And one of the items that, or one of the conversations that continued was last year when we asked, what can we help to support the team, was to help get the voice out there that the Kent Educators of Color Network was a group that could help support new staff. So for new employee orientations, I have 2 slides that have been provided by the Kent Educators of Color Network. They have been invited to join me at new employee orientations. If they're not there, I still present the slides. And then the second piece is starting to have a conversation about a website where we can gather the resources for new employees to be able to look at information. Mr. Hunter, if you wanted to add additional information.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. So I think the most critical piece when we presented last year and where we are this year is the trust, right? In partnering, collaborating with the Kent Educators of Color. Understandably so, they were a little leery in terms of what was happening with the affinity groups when, as they shared with both Irene and I, they already have affinity groups embedded into the work that they're doing. So Irene and myself, we thought about it all summer long in terms of, so how do we continue to support the Kent Educators of Color and come alongside of the work that they're doing and with the limited resources that are available, right, to get the affinity groups up and running. So we decided to continue to partner with and collaborate with the Kent Educators of Color, given that they already have the affinity groups or that concept embedded into what they provide to the system. And so that was the decision that I made. Things are going well. We've built that trust. And the other piece that I really appreciate about the Kent Educators of Color is their inclusivity, right? They're inclusive of all races. The diversity that we know includes more than just race. They're inclusive of the entire Kent School District. So that was the reason. The decision for me was easy to continue to collaborate, partner, and support the Kent Educators of Color in our goal 4, the whole goal, which is to create those safe places and spaces for staff that need that, to continue to work on behalf of the students here in KSD each and every day. So with that, that concludes HR's presentation. I will now open it up for any questions.
Board Chair recognizes Director Clark.
So I'm going to go all the way back to the 5th slide, if we can. All right, it's quite observable when you look at career and technical ed that it continues to grow. So my first question is that due to a greater federal investment in that arena?
I think that is contributed by the increase in enrollment. And you see career technical education, because if you look at the 5-year average on slide number 4, CT or career technical education shows an average of about 1,637 enrollment. The projection is 1,925. I think it's on the next slide. Yeah. The one, no, the next one. There you go. Projection is 1,925, and on the first count in September, we are already at 1,895, and that number may still be growing from here on out.
Okay, and so related to that question, yes, I realize more students are signing up, but that's not the, what I'm trying to get at is, are there more programs that are being created? Now, obviously, we just approved a grant to go along with the city of Kent, and I assume that will count for some of that expansion. But what I'm trying to get at is, typically, there has been, particularly in the realm of technology, obviously it affects the basic core of the workforce nowadays. And the question is the money coming in from the feds, from the state, or from some other source that's expanding some of those opportunities?
They're coming from the state. There is a small portion coming from the state. It's a small portion of the CTE funding that is federal, which is called Carl Perkins program, and that is a very small portion of the CTE funding.
Okay.
The other piece I'd like to mention, Director Clark, is you're right, not only do we have enrollment growing, that enrollment grows with the types of pathways and offerings we have. And I can say this with certainty that CT is probably one of the only areas that we do see an increase in staffing when we have the right programs and pathways. The board heard the partnership that we have with our City of Kent and Kent Chamber and our Workforce Development Task Force. That is one of the focus areas that we're trying to create and continue to grow. So it's a yes and with those pieces. So I thank the team under the leadership of our Assistant Director of CTE, Mr. Jeff Baker, who is working closely with not only Carol Cleveland, but also John Rissmiller. All of those, the team works closely together on that Workforce Development Task Force to open up the different kinds of pathways we have here in our Kent Valley.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify your statement on the, is it because we've offered more programs, we have more students in it? And this is the, I didn't understand the comment about this is one of the only ones where we're getting, when we offer more, we get more.
Yeah, and Mr. Paragal could speak to that as we offer, expand the types of programs and pathways we have that we hadn't offered before.
Yep.
That begins to get more students that want to be a part of that, and then we just get the staffing because the funding comes with that.
Yeah, as
Mr.
more
Paragal?
students enroll, it equates to more funding.
Okay, but if we were to open up other programs too, we may get more students, we just may not get funding.
That is true, but there would be a corresponding increase, potentially corresponding increase in enrollment in the basic education does also increase the funding. And so because if there are more programs in the district, basic ed or CTE, that ultimately will increase the funding because those are all driven by enrollment.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, I just didn't
That's fine.
understand the answer.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Well, yes, I do. The paraeducation numbers, what's missing from the picture for me is our surrounding neighboring districts, because I'm well aware that paras were a universal issue throughout the country, and urban districts obviously get a little extra impact. But when I want to just look at Auburn, Federal Way, Highline, and Renton, are they about in the same shape as we are?
I would venture to guess yes, right? I mean, we're all in this together, right? In the conversations that I have with my colleagues in other districts, we talk about and share kind of the challenges, but then also the strategies that everyone is deploying to try to increase, right, the pool, if you will.
And is this in regards to the open positions?
Yeah.
On page 16? Okay, thank you.
If I may also add to that, Director Clark, and it's really for our board and there is a difference, and that is with some districts, that our collective bargaining agreement has stated ratios and numbers that require us to have X amount of paras for each program. Not all districts have that, or if they do, they may be a little different. So I offer that in just as a variable to that, not so much exactly. However, the challenges are out there and opportunities. Thank you.
Director
Yeah, I had,
Cook? The chair recognizes Director Cook.
I just had a question on, because it looks like it says in the staffing section, it's, I guess, slide number 7, that the reason for the decrease is enrollment decreasing. Are there other reasons why we're lowering? Because it shows on that beginning slide that enrollment has declined 1.2%, but we're reducing staffing by 6.8% across the board, and that's 6.8 for the K through 5, and looks like 6.6 for middle school, 8.2 for high school, and then 12.5 at the academy schools. Is there a reason why we're decreasing more than what is being affected by the enrollment numbers? Sorry, I did my own calculations because I didn't.
It's the first staffing slide, yep. So I can speak to that. As Irene had spoken to, we did leave, during the COVID years, our staffing remained at a higher level. We did not start reducing staffing at that point. We kept our staff on. This is not only a product of enrollment, we're also continuing to decrease to make sure our staffing levels are at the appropriate levels based on our enrollment. It's taken a few years to get there. So that's one of the reasons.
Okay, so it's due to the ESSER funds being removed, is that right?
So as far as the basic education, because this is only our classroom FTE, not our success coaches that were funded out of ESSER, I would say that staffing levels are determined, or ratios are determined as we review our staffing and our projected enrollment, and what staffing levels we're going to be sitting at, how we're going to staff our classrooms, if you will.
I see. And so what did we anticipate a 6.8% reduction in enrollment, and that's why we went with that number for reducing staff, or was that an issue separate from that somehow?
I could try to answer that. So, well, it's sometimes easy to equate enrollment and staffing together and say a drop of, let's say, 2% in enrollment could equate to 2% reduction in staffing. See, that's not necessarily always the case, because a drop in enrollment could be 2 students from here, 3 students right here, 5 students here. Cumulatively, district-wide, it's a drop of 291 students, but you're not able to necessarily drop your staffing as quick. Now, you could actually reverse the situation depending on the student population that shows up at the grade level, at which classroom. You may be able to generate savings by filling up every seat that is available. And so one of the ways of calculating staffing is, okay, the easiest one is 26-1 or 30-1, but that's not always the case. It depends on the number of students that comes at the grade level and the number of students that comes at a particular building. That's actually how it is calculated. And so, like I said, it's very easy to equate the percent to percent, but not necessarily the case. We have to look at classroom by classroom to figure out exactly how much do we need to reduce it by, or how much do we need to add it, depending on the number of students at each classroom.
What about program needs? Does that?
Well, I think the program needs is also the same, depending on where the programs are offered. For example, for inclusive education, we provide services at every building, and sometimes you have a ratio. If you could actually load them at 12-1, but if you have 8, you cannot just reduce the staffing because you have to continue on. Sometimes we have to make decisions whether we need to combine services from one location to the other, but that also has other consequences like busing, schedules, and things like that. So.
Okay. I guess I understand that we might have different programs, but it seems like our staffing should match roughly. I mean, it's about 5 times the difference, so it's a pretty significant difference. I just don't know why that would be if we're looking at the number of students being reduced by 1.2%, but we're not changing like anywhere near that. We're changing by 6.8, and that seems like a big difference between those two. And I know there's probably some amount that's going to be due to changes in a few things here and there, but I feel like going from 1.2 to 6.8 seems like a bit of a stretch to say that it's due to like minor changes here and there in the way that we do staffing, but maybe I'm understanding this incorrectly.
So,
I can speak to that. I think it's important to remember that over the last 2 years, through our budget presentations, we've shared the inequity between our enrollment decline and our staffing increase. And so because there has been such a gap, and the gap was growing coming out of COVID up until the last couple of years, that's when we started our step-down process. And so because we had enrollment that had decreased by well over 1,000 students, we were still increasing our staffing. And so we got to a point where we as a system needed to make a decision, knowing that the ESSER was coming to an end, that we needed to start to step that down. So each year over the last few years, we've been decreasing our staffing. We're still not to the point where our enrollment equals our staffing based on state allocations. So that's why you're not going to see a 1% for 1%. They're not going to match up like that because we were so far off to begin with.
I see. But you stated that ESSER funds weren't related to that. Is this something different, or?
No,
Did I
ESSER's,
understand that right?
I mean, ESSER funds played a role in everything that we did. When you have $99 million and you over the 3 years, you're working to continue to hang on to your staff, things like that. We are one of the only districts in the region that did not let our paraeducators go, or let our bus drivers go, or let our food service workers go. We held on to them and continued to pay them. All that has an impact in the overall scheme of reducing our budget. And so when we come back to the table and we're working on a step-down process, and we're looking at our student enrollment, which drives our funding for our staffing, specifically for our teachers, and there's such a gap, we have to fix that gap, and we've been doing that for the last 3 years, and we'll continue to do that until we're more aligned.
I see. I understand we chose to keep staff. Did we look at basically reducing staff by attrition, right? Was that something that was done during that period? I mean, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the nitty-gritty details, a few years ago, but I'm just curious if that was.
So during that step-down process, that is exactly how we did it. We ran our staff through an IVT process. We did through attrition. We recaptured FTE that way, and then we reshuffled our staff throughout the district. That's why the last few years we have had a higher number of involuntary transfers and running through that process.
And so we had a decrease in staffing as well because I only see 23, 24 and 24, 25, but that, I would assume the bar graph would continue down like that, so it would be higher in 22, 23, and 21, 22, is that right?
Correct. As I mentioned, last year we reduced, 54.6 FTE. That was the reduction from the previous year, and this year again 66 FTE. So that is the step down, but with through attrition and reshuffling throughout the district staff.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And if I may add, great questions, Director Cook. Back to Mr. Parangal's point about when we look at the enrollment, we look at it district-wide and by grade band. And sometimes, and keep in mind, we have a projection that we staff to. And then when students begin to arrive, that's when we begin to see how we did. And you heard about how accurate we've been so far. That is still 150 to 200 students, still pretty good. Districts around us were farther from that projection or that target, where you've seen actual layoffs or actual changes from their projection. We've done pretty good, and I just wanted to say great questions, and also let our team know, especially Lisa Tyler, who's here, taking up the bulk of that work. Great job we've done, especially during COVID and then coming out of it. It's been difficult, as you might imagine, for all districts to really get a hone in on. So are we getting kids back or not? And if so, to what extent are we able to stay flat? That's what I'm hearing out there as a word. The last thing I'll say, just for our board's understanding, is that looking at things statewide, things are continuing from a birth rate and enrollment continuing to get smaller. Given that, we also have to adjust, and I know my team has heard that, and we'll continue to keep our board posted, but great questions.
The other question I had is, looking at iGrad's numbers, I see that, 2019 to 2020, they were at 271, and then it dropped after that. But ever since, it's been increasing every year. And we were projecting 415, and we're seeing 137. What's driving the discrepancy there? Because that's a pretty significant difference between them.
It is timing. I think we're only on month one. And so as mentioned, as we go through the months, we're going to see this number grow.
I see. And the numbers that we're looking at for for 23-24, that number is, I assume, from the end of the year?
Yes, that's the average for the entire year.
I see. Okay. And I know there's a lot of movement in iGrad. I know they gain and lose students quite a bit in comparison to the rest of the school. So thank you for explaining that. That's all my questions.
It is 5:59. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your presentation. Always informative, and appreciate the work that goes into it. Superintendent Vela, any last comments?
Yeah, no, just again, thank you for the questions from our board, and to all our entire team, thank you for the work that you've done thus far and the work you're going to continue to do. I look forward to coming back to the board and really continuing to keep you posted, learn more about what's not only happening in Kent, but around the state, especially as we look to our legislature. And I know Director Clark has been keeping close tabs on what's happening there, and look forward to coming back and sharing more with our board.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. It is 6 p.m., and this work session is now adjourned. The executive session scheduled for 6 p.m. has been canceled due to a lack of board quorum. We will call our regular meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. See you back here at 6:30. Good evening. It is 6:30, and we are calling this regular meeting to order. Our first order of business is to take roll call for attendance. I'll call each board member's name, and if present, they will say present. Do know that both Director Song and Vice President Farah are both absent and excused. Director Cook?
Present.
Director Clark?
Present.
And I am present. Director Cook, will you help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We welcome the public's participation in this board meeting and thank those of you who have come to this meeting and who are viewing our live stream. The purpose of board meetings is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Whether made verbally, in person, verbally on video, or written, comments are limited to a total of one per person per regular board meeting. One additional comment per person may be submitted for a public hearing topic if there is a public hearing on the agenda. All forms of public comment are subject to Chapter 4256 RCW Public Records Act. The public may comment at regular board meetings in a manner authorized by state law. All comments must adhere to Policy 1420 and Procedure 1420P. If you wish to make a comment to the board, comment forms are available for completion prior to the meeting, and forms must be turned in no later than the beginning of the legislative report. No forms will be accepted once this report has begun. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comments will be heard after the agenda review. Students will be first to speak on any topic during the student voice portion of the agenda, which takes place immediately following the opening. General public comments from non-students will be heard during preliminary communications from the audience. Any remaining comments, whether from students or non-students, will be heard at specific agenda items and during final communication from the audience. Student comments will be heard first on any topic. Please state your first and last name prior to the beginning your testimony. Abuse of public comments personally directed towards the board, staff, or students will not be tolerated. The use of specific names or personally identifiable information of board, staff, or students is not allowed. Board members or KSD staff members may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when not adhering to Procedure 1420P. All comments, whether verbal or written, must adhere to the standards of civility as defined in Policy 1400, Meeting Conduct, Order of Business, and Quorum. If you're seated in an overflow room, there's a brief delay in the live stream audio. We will allow extra time for you to make your way to the boardroom after your name is called. Individuals with items for the board or superintendent may provide the items directly to safety services staff. Approaching the dais during the board meeting is not allowed. Any items turned in will be provided to the board and the superintendent following the meeting. Item 1.06, land acknowledgement. Director Clark, will you please read our land acknowledgement?
We acknowledge we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe who historically lived throughout the area between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound.
Thank you, Director Clark. Item 1.07, agenda review. Superintendent Vela, are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we add an agenda item on the discussion and approval agenda to end Resolution 1669 effective immediately.
A motion has been made. Is it seconded?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. We are open for discussion.
I guess I'm curious, it's the first I've heard of it, so I just don't know what's driving this change.
I think that would be probably for the discussion during 1669, and this would just be adding it to the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We can discuss it then.
Okay.
Thanks.
Seeing that there's no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor for adding agenda item 7.06, repeal of Resolution 1669.
Can I add something else to the agenda then, if this is going to be discussed?
This is an open motion first, so we need to
Oh, okay.
vote on it first.
Sure.
So motion has been made and seconded, and we are now in voting for approval of item 7, for adding item 7.06, repeal of Resolution 1669. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0. Now, Director.
Yeah, I would like to propose that my legal fees be paid, given that we are removing this resolution that is the reason for my doing so in the first place. I don't know how that works, but
So are you adding an agenda item?
yeah, to pay the legal fees that I've incurred so far.
Okay, so you need to make a motion to add an agenda item?
Okay. Which item number are we at then?
It would be 7.07.
Okay. I'd like to add agenda item 7.07, request to approve legal fees being paid for board member Donald Cook. Is that appropriate? Okay.
That's your motion?
Yeah.
Okay, seeing that there's no second, we are moving on to the next item. Superintendent Vela, is there any changes to the agenda other than adding item 7.06, repeal of Resolution 1669?
President Markell, the only change I hear is adding to 7.06.
Thank you. Is there a motion from the board?
Move approval of the agenda as stated.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as stated, which is as presented, including item 7.06, repeal of Resolution 1669. Second? We are open for discussion. Seeing no discussion, there's a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as presented with the addition of 7.06. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Sorry. All those against?
Nay.
The motion passes 2-1. We are now on to item number 2.01, our public comment section.
Thank you, President Markell. As you know, our first general meeting, we added the student section or student voice. And so I'll ask Ms. Zantello if we have any students either online, or in person. Ms. Zantello?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to.
President Margell, members of the board, and Superintendent Vela and Ms. Curry. For the student voice section, to begin, we have 2 student comments tonight. There are additional comments being received at this time for the next section, which I'll announce when we arrive to that portion of the agenda.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker tonight is, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, is it Azalea Pug? And so the mic should be on, and just state your first and last name.
Hi, I'm Azrieh, and I just wanted to talk about PE requirements for high school graduation. I've done PE like a few times, and I think that there should be a little bit less requirement on that, because I feel that if you're doing things outside of school, it shouldn't matter as much. And that was it. Thank you.
Our second speaker is Emily Richter.
Good evening, my name is Emily Richter. I'm a senior at Kentwood High School. I'm here to talk a bit about the recent lockdown that happened at my school on September 26th. I was peacefully sitting in my ceramics class working on my project when the siren went off that we were in lockdown. My class and the photography class went in a separate room where supplies are stored, and we sat there for exactly 1 hour and 26 minutes. I felt pretty safe actually because I was inside a separate room and thankfully I could hear nothing. Little did I know that the incident was occurring on the other side of the wall where I was sitting. I did hear from a teacher later in mine that she could hear everything that happened and later informed me that the principal sent out a letter in the news. The very next day, there was even more threats against campus. I was afraid to go to school that day, but I pushed myself and I went. I debated back and forth whether to stay or leave because missing classes and making up work is hard, especially in high school. I managed to get all the way to 5th period. Since the threat was specific to after school, I decided at that point to leave. Thankfully, I had a car at school and I can do that. Most students are not able to. I lost track of how many lockdowns I've been in during my entire education with Kent School District. It is a sad reality about schools these days. My first lockdown, I was terrified and began to hyperventilate, and I was on the verge of tears the whole time. During this last lockdown, I was just purely pissed off. Despite being angry, my fear does not go away. The last 2 years in general, atmosphere at school has been worse and feeling more and more dangerous. I'm afraid to go to school most days, although I have found ways to prepare myself for anything at any moment. I make sure my water bottle is full so I can hit someone in self-defense if needed. I carry my keys in my hand with a firm grip so I can stab someone if I'm in danger. I'm traumatized and I'm not even 18 years old yet. I live in worry and constant fear. It distracts me from my schooling, which I actually enjoy. And when I can't concentrate, it stresses me out and I fear I won't get good grades to get in a decent college. All that said, my main concern is that I wanted to bring to the board today was that during the entire time we were in lockdown that day, the groundskeeper was busily mowing the lawn. He had no clue what was going on. It was like he was in his own little world. He wears hearing protection to do his job so he could not hear the siren. How can it be that he isn't notified if his life is in danger? This is completely unacceptable. Whether they are KSD employees or contract employees, there needs to be a change made to their radios or communication devices so they're aware of dangers or emergencies that are happening. This groundskeeper was seen by multiple students and faculty during the whole lockdown, and he continued to do his job like nothing was going on. I'm sickened by this, and it seemed there's a pretty easy solution to fix this, and probably not even expensive. Likely, it would be a new headset that are part of new notification systems that are sent out like when parents get them. Their lives matter too. I would urge the board to immediately look into this. If we happen to be in dangerous situations at the school and ultimately can't protect us, they should be able to at least get the word out to everyone working on campus so that if their lives are in danger, they can protect themselves. KSD needs to do better.
Thank you. And we had no online or written comments submitted. We do have a mighty recognition section today, and our first one is going to start with Director Clark and America's Safe Schools Week.
Whereas schools make substantial contributions to the future of America and to the development of the nation's young people as knowledgeable, responsible, and productive citizens, and whereas the National School Safety Center, state governors, and state superintendents sponsor America's Safe Schools Week this week of October 16th through 20th, 2024, and whereas excellence in education is dependent upon safe, secure, and peaceful school settings, and whereas the safety and well-being of many students, teachers, and school staff are unnecessarily jeopardized by crime and violence, such as substance abuse, gangs, bullying, poor discipline, vandalism, and absenteeism in our schools, and whereas it is the responsibility of all citizens to enhance the learning experience of young people by helping to ensure safe and effective discipline, promote good citizenship, and generally make schools safe and secure, and whereas all leaders, especially those in education, law enforcement, government, and business, should eagerly collaborate with each other in the National School Safety Center, a partnership of the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Education to focus public attention on school safety and identify, develop, and promote innovative answers to these critical issues. And whereas school safety programs in numerous schools and school districts throughout the country, along with national programs, are among those innovative answers. And whereas the observance of the Safe Schools Week will substantially promote efforts to provide all our nation's school with positive and safe learning climates. Now therefore be it resolved, the Kent School Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of making our schools safe, secure, and peaceful places for teaching, learning, and working, free of drugs, alcohol, weapons, and fear, and proclaims the week of October 16th through 20, 2024 as America's Safe Schools Week in the Kent School District.
Thank you, Director Clark. I am proud to be able to read the National School Bus Safety Week proclamation. Whereas National School Bus Safety Week is an active and evolving public education program and is an excellent way for parents, students, teachers, motorists, school bus operators, school administrators, and community members to join together to address the importance of school bus safety. And whereas Kent School District buses meet or exceed federal and state regulations and consistently receive 100% passing score in the annual inspection by the State Patrol. And whereas many students begin and end their day with a school bus ride, approximately 8,350 students are transported daily on 110 routes and 150 school buses, traveling approximately 1,447,188 miles each year. And whereas this year's theme for National School Bus Safety Week is Driving Safely into the Future, the board recognizes the high caliber of the transportation team and commends staff for their exemplary job of safely transporting students. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of student safety and proclaims the week of October 21 through 25, 2024, National School Bus Safety Week in Kent School District. Signed this 9th day of October by the Kent School District Board and the Secretary to the Board, Israel Bella. I also get to read our third National School Lunch Week. Whereas having access to and eating a nutritious lunch is an important part of a student's educational day and positively impacts the ability to learn. And whereas the Kent School District is an active participant in the National School Lunch Program, which is dedicated to the health and well-being of our nation's children, with the goal to provide nutritional, attractive, and currently free lunches to all students and other children 18 years of age and younger. And whereas the district staff of the Nutrition Service Department work together to provide a quality lunch program that offers healthy meals that include local and regional food products identified through an expanding farm-to-school program and actively supports the goals of the academic community. And whereas this year's theme, School Lunch Pirates, Find Your Treasure, is a timely reminder that research shows that children who participate in the school lunch program perform better in their academic efforts. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Kent School District Board of Directors supports the work of the nutrition services staff and proudly proclaims the week of October 14 through 18, 2024, National School Lunch Week in the Kent School District. Signed this 9th day of October 2024 by the Kent School District Board and the Secretary of the Board, Israel Bella. Our next proclamation is Filipino American History Month by Director Cook.
Turn that on. There we go. Kent School District Proclamation on National Physical Therapy Month. That's the one I'm doing, right? No, you said the other one, but that is in a different order. Yeah, it's in a different order than what you said. That's okay. Filipino American History Month. Whereas Filipino Americans are one of the largest Asian American and Pacific Islander ethnic populations in Washington state, and the second largest in the United States, and whereas Filipino Americans contribute to the enrichment and quality of life in our state and the nation, and whereas the earliest documented Filipino presence in the continental United States was October 18th, 1587, when the first Luzones, maybe Indios, arrived in Morro Bay, California. And whereas Filipino American History Month provides an opportunity to promote the study of Filipino American history and culture, recognize the richness of Filipino American ethnicity, and honor the contributions of Filipino Americans, especially their service with distinction in the United States military. And whereas Washington's educational leaders are developing programs and resources to support stronger partnerships between families, schools, and communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District joins Washington State Governor Jay Inslee and the Washington State House of Representatives in proclaiming the month of October as Filipino American History Month. Signed this 9th day of October, 2024.
Thank you, Director Cook. Director Clark, could you please read the LGBT History Month?
Whereas LGBT History Month celebrates the achievements of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals, and whereas in 1994, a Missouri high school teacher gathered other teachers and community leaders and selected the month of October to be dedicated to the celebration and teaching of gay and lesbian history, and whereas just under a quarter of students are taught LGBT history in schools, and only 4 states require its public schools to include LGBT history in the curriculum. And whereas LGBT History Month is recognized to remind both the LGBT and wider communities of the important roles LGBT individuals have played in creating the social, legal, and political worlds in which we live. Whereas the Kent School District Board believes in fostering an educational environment that is safe and free of discrimination for all students, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Now therefore be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors recognizes the month of October as LGBT History Month and encourages the discussion of LGBT history in schools and classrooms during that time.
Thank you very much, Director Clark. Director Cook, could you please read our National Bullying Prevention Month?
Yes. Whereas school bullying has become an increasingly significant problem in the United States and Washington State, and whereas over 20% of the youth in the United States are estimated to be involved in bullying each year, either as a bully or as a victim, and whereas an estimated 160,000 students in kindergarten through 12th grade miss school every day due to a fear of being bullied, and whereas bullying can take many forms, including verbal, physical, and most recently in cyberspace, and can happen in many places on and off school grounds, and whereas it is important for Kent School District parents, students, teachers, and school administrators to be aware of bullying and to encourage discussion of the problem as a school community. And whereas the Kent School Board has an active policy prohibiting harassment, intimidation, and bullying, encouraging positive behaviors, and eliminating bullying behaviors for all students, employees, parents/legal guardians, volunteers, and community members. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District recognizes the month of October 2024 as National Bullying Prevention Month in the Kent School District, with the intention that the issue of bullying and its prevention be discussed in Kent School District schools and classrooms during that time. Signed this 9th day of October 2024.
Thank you very much, Director Cook. How about helping us with National Physical Therapy Month?
Sure. Whereas the Kent School District is committed to supporting students with special needs and providing every student with equal access to education regardless of physical needs, and whereas the American Physical Therapy Association recognizes how physical therapists and their assistants improve people's lives by restoring and improving their abilities of movement, and whereas the Kent School District encourages staff, students, and community members to help increase awareness of the benefits of physical therapy during the month of October. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the month of October as National Physical Therapy Month in the Kent School District and calls upon all citizens and civic organizations to join in the national effort to raise awareness of physical therapy and how therapists and their assistants improve students' access to education. Signed this 9th day of October 2024.
Thank you very much. Last one, National Principals Month, Director Clark.
Whereas the National Association of Secondary School Principals and the National Association of Elementary School Principals have declared the month of October as National Principals Month, whereas principals are educational visionaries, instructional and assessment leaders, disciplinarians, community builders, budget analysts, facilities managers, and administrators of legal and contractual obligations, whereas principals work collaboratively with teachers and parents to develop and implement a clear mission, high curriculum standards, and performance goals, whereas principals create school environments that facilitate great teaching and learning and continuous school improvement, whereas the vision, actions, and dedication of principals provide the mobilizing force behind any school reform effort, whereas the celebration of National Principals Month honors elementary school, middle school, and high school principals in ensuring that every child has access to a high-quality education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaim the month of October 2024 as National Principals Month.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 4.01, public comments.
I'll ask Ms. Antella to come up and share our public comment.
Good evening once again, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry. 2 comments here in person for this preliminary communication section, and 1 online comment, video comment received for this same section.
Our first comment is with Tom Lynch.
Thank you and good evening. My name, as you said, is Tom Lynch. I am a homeowner here in the district. I have been for 47 years. For 29 of those years, besides my primary career, I was a substitute school bus driver for the transportation department. I came to the last school board meeting after hearing the previous meeting had gone well into the hours of the next day with 2 concerns, one being with a teacher and one with the extension of the district superintendent's contract. I will admit I don't know the details of the teacher issue, but as far as the superintendent, I don't believe this was handled appropriately at all. In my 47-year career in large publicly traded corporations, I spent 18 years doing labor contract negotiations. As I understand it, the board president negotiated with the superintendent without another board member involved in direct negotiations, which is at least unethical. I also found that nothing in the board's president's bio on the district website suggested that they had the experience and education to be negotiating a contract of this extension for the superintendent. I would go on to why many in the public feel that extending the superintendent's contract at this time was at least bad timing, but I won't because I only have 3 minutes. What did surprise me at the last board meeting was after a speaker praised the action the district took in the teacher issue, the observers in the room applauded. Those of us that were in the room were scolded by the board president saying clapping was not allowed as this was a business meeting. Another speaker challenged the no clapping position of the president by citing the board's own policy on that matter, which I thought was interesting. A third speaker who became quite emotional during their presentation was also applauded, at which time the president threatened to remove the audience. That got my attention. So between then and now, I reviewed the district's policy on meeting contact, which is right here, which it refers to uncivil comments and then has 6 bullet points of examples that don't include clapping, and also gives the board final decision ruling on uncivil comments and the power to remove those who are disruptive. It also recognizes the difference between uncivil discourse and comments about the board, district, or staff that is negative, yet still civil in nature, and to exercise its authority in a content-neutral manner. In my 47-year career in large publicly traded companies, I have been to many business meetings, from small divisional meetings to full shareholder meetings. Clapping is a normal event that happens in all those business meetings and should be more than tolerated here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Leslie Hamada.
Good evening, Board. My name is Leslie Hamada, and thank you for allowing me to speak. President Margell, directors. I took the time to write a letter to all of you that you received, but I wanted this to be in public comment because I don't see my suggestion to add to the agenda that I put in my letter. With great concern, I am writing this email and have thought long and hard in regard to composing it. Working with the citizens of Kent Schools for years, I have worried what the situation of our capital project and technology replacement coming to a complete end on December 31st, 2024, if our current levy does not pass. We, of course, are working hard to see it does pass. But being a grandmother, mother, and taxpayer, I have learned to prepare and taught my 3 adult kids to prepare for alternatives. To date, I have not seen or heard what could be the consequences. I think our community needs to know the plan. There is a possibility, and I'm hoping not, that our levy will not pass. Yes, I know schools go on, and everyone will make work go on somehow. I know there is a reserve fund, but I also know that the KSD general budget is where the district would turn to emergency repairs or needs. If you tap into that, it's the spending to keep the lights on, the buses running, and staff paid. That budget, which stuck with me, is $1 million a day for just essentials. It sounds like a big number, but think how fast you could go through that major capital cost in emergency need if emergencies arise. I am respectfully asking for a view of what the plans are in place if this levy fails, so our community can understand all the sides of its voting. Plus, I think at your next board meeting, I hope you will go over all this and talk about that the general fund includes 85% of the general fund is already allocated for staff costs. That leaves only 15% left. So we all know that sports, musics, and programs are not a mandate of the state. I have heard our superintendent of schools of Washington talk about tightening your spending budgets in all districts. You only need to turn on the news and you see what's happening in other districts right now. There is no guarantee the state can rescue school districts. My focus has always been directly on the beautiful kids of this district. But like my own family, I was prepared for what could be ahead, good or bad. Personally, it brings me no joy or excitement in requesting this information, but I care too much to ignore it. Thank you for your time.
I believe there's one online comment.
That is correct, President Margell. There is one online video comment.
Hi, I am Cheryl DeBruler. I have 2 students at Suze Creek Elementary School, and I'm hoping to raise up concerns about the water lead testing report. The families at Suze Creek Elementary were emailed last week that the water lead testing report was available, but were not sent the report, so it felt a little clunky. It felt a little strange that we had to go each ourselves go to the district to get that. But I was able to go to the district to get it, and thank you for sending that to me. So my first question or concern for the board is making sure you're seeing those reports and taking the time to read through them. It is a lot of information. I'm sure it was a lot of information to just read through one report of Suze Creek Elementary. So I imagine reading through reports for all the schools would be difficult. Perhaps there'd be a way to summarize it or get bullet points, but just want to make sure, that's my first question, is making sure that information has been shared with you, because the report for Suze Creek Elementary is alarming. more than half of the water sources in the school have a level of lead that needs action. And it's about 22% of the sources that the lead is so high that that water source has to be turned off and fixed. So just want to make sure that that information is circulating and being prioritized. My second question is, what is the funding and the timing for addressing this at our school and any school with this issue? Have those high-level sources been turned off? Are the medium-level sources, do they have the flush for 30-second stickers? Is that all done, or is that still being worked on? And is there funding to address this right now? And if not, if the levy passes, are things going to have to be reprioritized to address this? Because I know there's some really important things in the levy, really highly visible things, but this is something that's invisible. And I'm afraid it won't be maybe prioritized only because people don't know about it. And the third point is the recommendation from the district is that the children use the water bottle filling stations. As far as I know, there's only 2 at our school. So what is being done to help equip the staff with that new direction and procedure? So thank you for your time, and I hope to hear more about what the funding and the timeline is to address this.
Thank you. That's the end of our public comment section. We now move on to section 5.01, Superintendent Report. Superintendent Vela, if you would give us your report.
Thank you, President Margell. I'd like to start first tonight by thanking staff for their presentation at our work session, and thank you to our board for the questions you had as well. I think as we continue to learn together, keep each other informed and communicate, I think that will help us as we move forward in our
Sorry, I'm
work
going
together.
to step away for a moment. You can continue. I'm just going to be stepping outside. I'll be back.
I will continue. So thank you to our HR staff and our business finance team for the great work that you did and the work you continue to do. So that a few items I want to share today kind of cover 4 different areas. I think the first I want to share is a wonderful professional development opportunity I had a chance to attend, and I really wanted to share with you. The other is my typical is where I do a few shout outs. That's shout outs to our staff, students, and building leaders that I get the wonderful opportunity to see each week. I also wanted to share with you a statewide presentation I heard at our regional superintendent's meeting last Friday that I had a chance to attend with Dr. Behringer. And then lastly, just a community reminder that I'd like to make sure that we all hear. And so let me start with the professional development opportunity, and I think it's important always to share. So when you walk away from a professional development opportunity, what difference did that make? And how do we take that into our everyday life as we move forward? I wanted to share Dr. Behringer's takeaway. By the way, he knows I'm sharing this, but in his communication on, so what was his experience? And I'm just going to read that. I had an emotional and highly impactful experience at our Community Network Council's CNC Anti-Racist Conference on Wednesday, October 2nd. It ran from October 1st through October 3rd. I was mesmerized by the keynote speaker, Dr. Joy DeGruy, author and the author of the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, as she shared her critical work and research around the history of our African American communities and their adaptive survival behaviors that they still practice to this day. This was a powerful and eye-opening experience for me as a white leader in a diverse community. I too wanted to share that I attended the next day. We kind of attended different days. That not only did I attend, there were several of staff from KSD. We were very well represented. We had students as well that represented a couple of our high schools as well that were at the conference. And just to name a few, we had our Kent Educators of Color Network, several members I was able to greet. We had Ms. Simone Hamilton, our Director of Equity and Strategic Engagement. Assistant Principal Michael Cohen from Meeker High School attended. David Radford. I'm sure I'm leaving quite a few others out. As for me, I was able to attend where I was with high school students as they were sharing their experiences, not only in their upbringing as students of color, but also their experiences that they go through in our education system. I found out that the conference was more than enlightening. As Dr. Behringer said, we walked away just amazed. I wanted to publicly thank Ms. Barbara Phillips from our Community Network Council that actually put this together. There were several keynote speakers that I wanted just to make sure that that we heard, had the opportunity to hear. A couple of which, and I'll leave a few out, Dr. Joy DeGuri that I just mentioned, out of Portland State University, and I just mentioned the author, what he authored. Also Dr. Fatima Stanford, pediatric physician, researcher, and health policy expert at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. I had the opportunity to hear her speak. Dr. Ben Danielson, pediatric physician and professor of pediatrics, University of Washington Medical School. There were a number of other speakers that, like I mentioned, our staff, our students, building leaders. It was just well attended, including our very own representative who does a lot of work with us, as you know, Director Clark, our Washington State Representative Tina Orwell from the 33rd District also joined us, had a chance to chat with her. Again, a wonderful professional development opportunity for our whole district, I would say. I also want to share that we had our first leadership meeting on Thursday, October 3rd. And as I mentioned at our first meeting, I had the opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of several of our schools. It was great to be able to continue that on October 3rd. Although I was not able to attend that, I was able to, this week, personally deliver the celebrative certificate to the office staff or the principal leader of many of those schools that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So again, I want to express my gratitude and celebrate their hard work. So thank you to them. I also want to share a little bit more about the superintendent's meeting that Dr. Behringer and I attended last week. And for your reference, it's regional superintendents that attended. We had a chance to hear Superintendent Reichdahl speak. And one of the things I wanted to share is that, what I shared the last time is that there are districts that are around us that have challenges and opportunities in front of them. I think I shared earlier the cyber attack of our neighboring district, Highline School District, and our team. Thank you to Kyle and his team in offering support and some other ways for them. They are still going through this. So you think about the things that we might take for granted from a technology tool perspective. They're still having to do some things by paper pencil. But things are continuing to happen, and kids are attending school and doing great. So I wanted just to, again, acknowledge that. The key message that I walked away with, Director Clark, I know being our board's legislative representative, I know you do a lot of work with WASDA and just recently have prioritized our legislative priorities and what we'll be looking at. Superintendent Reichdahl is also looking at what we call the big three, fully funding special education, MSOCs, which that is something that for us, material supplies and operating costs, those are areas that we continue to look toward, as well as transportation costs that we don't get reimbursed for. And so that's continuing. He knows that. He's continued to help support us across the district. And then finally, I wanted to end with just a reminder to our community, we are 27 days away from the election. As we approach this important date, remember to check your voter registration to ensure that your voice is heard. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Vella. We are now about to go into our legislative update. I'd just like to remind the audience, this is the last time to get your comments into the blue drop box at the back of the room. Seeing nobody running, we move on to item 6.01, legislative update, and Director Clark, if you could give us the
As
update, please.
mentioned by Superintendent Bella, WASDO is literally in the process of developing all of the submissions of the top 10 priorities from all the school boards across the state. And then those obviously get compiled, and then we'll get a presentation on those in the big meeting in November. But if I can, just backstop. Not surprisingly, of course, fully funding special education has always been a fixture, and transportation costs that we aren't reimbursed for. But I was caught by surprise in the discussion of the MSOC stuff. We had a discussion on that, and the thing that was very pronounced was the increase in insurance costs. And I mean, obviously, school districts are, we have 44 facilities here, so you can imagine well, regardless of size of school district, you're impacted. And it's money that if we're not reimbursed for, has to come from someplace. So anyway, that process is underway at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Clark.
Can I make a recommendation while we're waiting some time here? I would have pulled item 701 because I want to acknowledge the folks that have been supporting us, and we'll have to wait to actually vote on that, but I can at least attribute some folks that have been very supportive of the school district.
Could we possibly, there's.
Anyway, if I can, I'd like to move 701 because I would have pulled it anyway.
Okay, so we are on the discussion and approval, so you are pulling item 7.01. Is there another item that anybody else would like to pull?
Isn't this all discussion and approval?
Yeah, this is discussion and approval, so we're not in consent, so actually
I'm
we just
sorry.
keep moving with the agenda.
My apologies. I suddenly heard everybody say discussion and approval. Thank you, I apologize. Thank you for the help on that one. Okay, so item 7.01, yes, if I would appreciate if we could pull that up and talk about that. So is there a motion on the floor?
I move that we approve item 701, gifts donations.
Second.
Great, there's a,
Second.
Yep, there's an approval, or sorry, there's a motion and a second on the floor for approval of item number 7.01, gifts, donations, and memorials acceptance. We are now open for discussion.
So I'd like to acknowledge some of our very generous partners out there. Kent Lake High School's music program got a cash amount from the Kent Lake PTSA of $19,200. So that's a real boost for the music program. Cedar Valley Elementary received donations on two different things. One was the drama club licensing rights fees, and the Cedar Valley PTA covered that with an $815 donation. And an anti-bullying assembly in November coming up has had an $800 contribution from Sarah Anderson. And Kent Meridian Drama Fall Production received from Tom and Marianne Koffler $5,000, which obviously is a substantial support for that program. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing as none, there's a motion on the floor for approval of item number 7.01, gifts, donations, and/or memorials acceptance. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 3-0. Is there a motion for item 7.02?
I move approval of second reading and adoption of policy 1450, absence of a board member.
Second?
We are now open for discussion on the motion to approve item 7.02, second reading and adoption of policy 1450, absence of a board member.
I just wanted to discuss this one a little bit. So I'm a little concerned that we're voting on something that affects the board directly, and we are missing two of our board members. So their voice is not being heard on this issue. Is the rest of the board amenable to us possibly, either, voting it down and then redoing this in our next meeting, or tabling it, or however you want to go about it? I'm okay with us continuing forward. I just feel like their voice is not being heard here.
Well, if I can, a little correction. I remind you that all of us were present when this was the first reading, and so, and we did adopt some changes within that, so it's not like
Yeah.
they're being overwhelmed.
And that's a fair argument.
If I may, I was just going to say this would be the second reading today, and we all had the work session, so I agree with you.
Yeah.
That we did.
Yeah, we had some, I know we had some issues with getting a Director Farah, communicating with us was kind of spotty here and there during that time, and I don't know. It feels odd to vote on something without the full board when it's something that affects the board as a whole. But I'm okay with us moving forward if that's what the rest of the board wants to do.
I believe procedurally we did do that. I would recommend that we do.
Procedurally, I think we move on, and again, it wasn't just in that one meeting. We have ample time of discussing beforehand, and everybody was given weeks to be able to comment and submit things online for their voices too.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this?
I don't think so. I'm going to end up abstaining from this vote. So I don't know if that affects anything, but that's the plan there for me.
We encourage each board member to vote their conscience.
Okay. Well, I mean, it would mean that I didn't vote. So does that, I don't know if that affects in a quorum or not, but.
So according to your board policies and according to Robert's rules, a majority vote of those present in the quorum. So a 2-0-1 would count as a resolution passing, as would a 2-1.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing as there's none, there's a motion on the floor for approval item 7.02, second reading and adoption of policy 1450, absence of a board member. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I guess I'll vote for it. Why not? Sorry. I voted incorrectly. I was reading something. Could you do that again? I apologize.
Yes. A motion is on the floor and has been seconded for approval of item 7.02, second reading and adoption of policy 1450, absence of a board member. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, say nay. All those abstaining,
Abstain.
the motion passes 2-0-1. Is there a motion on the floor?
I'd move approval 702, 703, second reading and adoption of policy 2415, performance-based pathway for high school graduation.
Is there a second?
Second?
A motion has been made and seconded for approval of item 7.03, second reading and adoption of policy 2415, performance-based pathway for high school graduation. We are now open for discussion.
If I'm not mistaken, this is just a rewrite of what the state basically forwarded as a prescription for what they're trying to do, and will help our kids with other pathways. So, sounds good.
Yeah, I was okay with it. It's just an adjustment slightly, so it doesn't seem to be like there's not a lot there.
Not a lot of change. Yep. Any other discussion? Seeing as none, there is a motion on the floor for approval of item number 7.03, second reading and adoption of policy 2415, performance-based pathway for high school graduation. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 3-0. Is there a motion on the floor?
So, I move approval of 704, second reading and adoption of policy 2418, waiver of high school graduation credits.
Is there a second?
Second?
The motion has been made and seconded. We are now open for discussion on item 7.04, second reading and adoption of policy 2418, waiver of high school graduation credits.
And once again, this is primarily an adoption based on changes in wording from state law.
Yeah, it is a new one for us, but it's not anything we're deciding to do. It's something we're basing it on RCW changes and such that are making things a little bit easier for our students to be able to properly move on from the school if they're needing other pathways for high school graduation.
Seeing as that there is no other discussion, there's a motion on the floor for approval of item number 7.04, second reading and adoption of policy 2418, waiver of high school graduation credits. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0. Is there a motion on the floor for item number 7.05?
I move to approve resolution number 1684, waiver of high school graduation credits.
Is there a second? That motion has been made and seconded. We are now open for discussion for item number 7.05, resolution number 1684, waiver of high school graduation credits.
I think this one was similar. It's just bringing things in line with the wording that we want to use best, experiencing housing insecurity is replacing homelessness, and it's just removing that word out. There's a few other things that have been changed slightly, but for the most part, it's substantially the same. It's just adjusting words to match what we want to do as a district.
Seeing that there's no other discussion, the motion has been made and seconded for approval of item number 7.05, resolution 1684, waiver of high school graduation credits. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0. Is there a motion on the floor for item number 7.06?
Megan, you've been talking too long.
Sorry, thank you. I believe we do have a public comment for 7.06.
Yes, one additional comment has been received. This also is the final comment of the night. This is for item 7.06, added at agenda review, repeal of resolution 1669.
Thank you, Ms. Antello.
And our comment is from Greta Nelson.
Hello, school board members. I'm interested in why this would be added to the agenda. It should have been done long ago. Could it be perhaps the information I learned last night? The public members may want to go check out muckrock, muckrock.com, do a search for Kent Parents for Change, and see some public records requests that have been submitted and some interesting memorandums to Israel Vela, superintendent, from general counsel dated March 7th. This was a memorandum it's an updated version of a February 15 memo. This was at the request of the board president. So this is really interesting that now this resolution would be on the agenda to be repealed immediately. Could it be from these disclosures that have been made and interesting topics in here that the public should go check out? Let me see, it is, Muckrock is a nonprofit collaborative news site and a public resource that brings together journalists, researchers, activists, and regular citizens to request, analyze, and share government documents. I suggest that the public go check that out and do a search on this school district. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Is there a motion on the floor for item 7.06?
Move approval of 706, the repeal of 1669.
Is there a second? I will second it. We are now open for discussion for item 7.06, repeal of Resolution 1669.
I'd like to know what's driving the this at this point. You know, my case was recently dismissed by the Superior Court of King County, and so I don't know what is causing this to then be repealed. I'm not against that idea. Of course, I've been against 1669 since it was first envisioned, but I haven't seen anything that would indicate a reason for us doing so at this point, as opposed to the past 10 months or so. So I don't know what's driving that. Maybe another board member can bring up why they brought it up.
I think I'll defer to the attorney.
Mr. Leonard?
So good evening to the board, President Margell, board directors. I would say at this point, the legal matter has reached a conclusion, as you've referred to it as a dismissal. A lot of the conversations would pertain to executive session, but I would say generally what's appropriate for open session is we're not bargaining right now, and so the genesis and the reason behind the resolution is no longer current because we're not bargaining. And the issue has been resolved in court. And so for that reason, the recommendation is to repeal Resolution 1669.
Okay, so given that it's no longer like that we're not bargaining, what was the purpose of it, considering we'll be bargaining in about 2 months? So that's not changing. We're still going to be bargaining with 6 additional unions, which obviously this resolution would impact those. By way of removing myself or possibly another board member if there was something that were to come up that would affect that. Why would we want to, as a board, remove this right before we go into those negotiations?
So Director Cook, if you're asking for my advice as to whether or not we need a Resolution 1669 in the future, I think we could probably address those questions elsewhere, where I could potentially provide legal advice. There are ways to manage conflicts of interest, as we've talked about in other fora. And I'll just say that it's not the only way. At this point, I think the conversation is about moving forward and having the ability to do so, and the recommendation is therefore to repeal 1669.
Okay. As far as that goes, your legal advice is saying that there still is a conflict of interest, and your understanding of conflict of interest, correct, in those 6 unions that are coming up, because KEA is not part of it, so it will not be KEA, only other unions at this point. And there's still a concern, in your legal opinion, that there's a conflict of interest with myself.
That's very broadly stated, Director Cook. You know, I did not advise the board. I was not your general counsel when 1669 was originally instituted. Certainly questions going forward, we will be able to answer, and I will have recommendations to the board as to how to address those conflicts as they come up.
So you are the legal counsel that is advising to repeal this, though, as Director Clark had you come up? Is that correct?
I've advised the board on this issue, correct.
Okay, but you're not able to speak to the why of that in any way?
I think I provided 2 reasons, one of which is the matter has been dismissed.
Mm-hmm. But is planned to be appealed, so, and that doesn't necessarily stop just because we repeal this.
I understand. Yeah. I still say that the recommendation is to repeal 1669.
And to what purpose? I mean, the idea that it's no longer needed because there's no active bargaining going on, that seems like a weak argument.
Well, it's to move forward, and and that is the recommendation that I'm making.
Okay. And when myself and my legal team had suggested that we move forward and remove this and discuss planning a discussion amongst the board on how we move forward and how we could do it amicably in a way that would not harm the district in any way, Did you share that request with the board?
So settlement conversations are not disclosable, and so any conversations that are pursuant to active litigation would not be ones that I'll be able to disseminate or share here in open session.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask it a different way. Have you advised the board in any way outside of just saying yes or no, going forward or back? Like, this isn't asking if you're giving any particular advice, just whether or not you've given more advice than just yes, we should continue, or no, we should not.
So other than the recommendation that's on the floor, I'm not going to get into attorney-client privileged information that would have been shared in an executive session beyond the recommendation that's on the floor, which is to repeal 1669, which is in consultation with counsel. I will not go any farther than that in providing any details about advice that might be attorney-client privileged.
Okay, and as far as that goes, with relation to the costs that I've incurred, of course, repealing this is not going to change that, which obviously the board is not interested in discussing that, even though we're discussing removal of this. In repealing this, does that have any effect regarding what has already happened based on 1669, or is it going to just wash our hands of it and move forward, or are we going to address any of the actions that were taken due to the passage of that resolution?
I'm not aware of any attorney's fees provision that is currently unaddressed, and that might be a more appropriate question for your attorney and not.
I don't mean that. I mean, is there going to be an accounting of what was done through 1669 and what the purpose of it was? It's pretty broadly written, and so my concern is that there were possibly actions taken using 1669 as the purpose of those actions, and if those actions were to be detrimental to a board member, that is my concern. My concern would be that if there was something done in a way that obviously restricted our board, which 1669 was done, it was passed in a way that was improper, as we did not vote to end discussion, even though I wanted to continue discussion. At the time, I was not aware of my right to continue discussion regardless. And so I did not press on that. I was also denied the ability of having counsel to discuss the issue in executive session or any other way. And those sorts of issues kind of were paramount into why I felt that it was such a poor resolution for us to continue with. Is there going to be any sort of accounting as to what happened, why it happened, and who made the choice, and why we're choosing to end it now? Because right at this point, all I'm hearing is it's not necessary because we're not going to be in bargaining, which then that makes me wonder, well, are we just going to keep going back and forth every time we go into bargaining, and we're just going to do this forever? You know, as long as I'm on this board, we're just going to wait until the next time there is bargaining needing to be done, and I'll be removed from it again. I don't see the purpose of removing it if it's possible for us to just come back, and especially if we're not accounting for why it was done, and we aren't going to bring up those issues of why we did this, what we learned from doing it, and how we're going to move forward. Because at this point, it seems like we're just shooting in the dark. We're saying we don't like it now and we're going to remove it, but it's not saying that we're not going to do it again, and not that we can't do it again. Is that correct?
The resolution doesn't say anything about the future. I mean, typically resolutions address actions or behaviors that are referenced in front of the board today. So you're correct. The resolution doesn't talk about a year or 2 or 3 down the road or the next bargaining season, nor would it be appropriate to do so. That would be really exercising probably beyond the authority of the board to constrain the board in the future to do something which potentially could be different board members. So that's usually not how resolutions operate. As to your question, as to will there be further conversation about this? Certainly, given that this potentially could be appealed and there could be future litigation on this, we will do as we've done previously, which is advise and counsel with the board in executive session under the RCW that allows for that conversation to happen in anticipation or in furtherance of litigation. And those conversations will happen as we discuss responses, strategies that could be pursuant to litigation. And so those conversations will continue to occur.
So, like my other question about the fact that we didn't pass this appropriately, in Robert's rules it states that if we do not follow our own rules, that anything we pass outside of those rules cannot be enforced. I had talked about that in the past. Is there a reason why we are not going that route and just saying that this was done improperly and we can just end it now, and that would in effect mean that it was never the case? It was never enforceable in the first place due to the fact that we did not follow our own rules and did not change those rules to be able to not follow those rules, which would also require a 2/3 vote.
So I'm not sure if I'm ready to respond to your question or if I've done the appropriate research. Are you talking about the original passage of 1669? Yes. That does predate my operation on the board as general counsel, and so I'm not sure for me whether or not the recommendation as to the reason why that I just gave you. There are a lot of justifications that are provided in executive session. They're not purview, or not that are not shared with the general public. I will just state the reasons that I told you previously. Is that the district is moving on and that we're repealing 1669, and that's what I can share with you in public.
Okay. My concern is that this sort of action could be used in the future if we don't address the idea that this is an improper action, that this could be used to possibly harm a board director in the sense of financial well-being, right? So far, I have spent about $45,000 of my own money, and some money has come from the public that supported me in that, and it's roughly about $5,000 to $6,000. My concern is that, if I keep being brought in to do that and I keep having to pay additional lawyer fees, and this board is not interested in paying for those lawyer fees, but is it sort of admitting that it was wrong, but not really? They're just saying that we don't need it, and to me that feels like it's not quite enough. And so I don't know what would stop that from happening next time. What would keep us from forcing any board member, not myself, but any board member, from being taken out of a conversation because our board decides that we don't want them there? And is there anything that you understand that would block us from doing that?
So I don't make resolutions. These are resolutions that are adopted and discussed by the board. And so I follow the lead as to the board as to what that majority position would be in the future. And so to your answer, to your question as to what protects an individual board member, it's the will of the board. This is the responsibility of the board to pass resolutions that are the majority position of the board. And so beyond that, I don't have any other response other than to your other question as to, is this an admission of some sort of liability? It is a repeal of 1669, and that's what it is. Beyond that, there is no other statement, nothing else attributed other than it's a repeal of 1669.
Okay. Maybe I can ask my fellow board members the reasoning behind not wanting to cover my legal fees, which have been substantial. Obviously, the legal fees on the other side have been covered entirely, which I did not bring this action. This was not something I chose to do. It was something that was chosen for me. And I reacted in the way I did because I didn't know what I could do. I wasn't allowed to have legal advice in that room that I trusted. And I was told multiple times that I couldn't have them there. I even had my lawyer at the time here on site, ready to come in, and that was denied. He was also available the second time in the ability to talk to us via online or phone. That was also denied. When I requested that this be pulled out of executive session and brought before the public, that was denied as well. So far, all I'm hearing is that we're just gonna get rid of this and we don't care about how this impacted someone. And that to me feels wrong. It feels like I was punished for no reason. I was punished in a way that impacted me both personally and reputationally. I think it was a poor decision that we made. I think the fact that we are looking at repealing it at this point is an admission that it was wrong, because otherwise, why remove it now? If you are so concerned about the district and what we do moving forward, why are you feel that way now, but you didn't for the past 10 months of my being on this board? And I would just like you to speak to that in some way, anyway.
Director Clark?
No, I'm satisfied to move on.
I feel like the question's been asked and answered.
Okay, maybe I can rephrase it. Why should we repeal this? What does it do that is beneficial to our district?
1669 has served its purpose, and it seems like Director Clark is bringing this forward today to be able to move forward.
Okay. How did it serve its purpose?
I think that's, again, going back in the past, and we've talked about 1669 ad nauseum, and that it's not going to be tried and discussed here today, at least not by me.
Well, I mean, it is going to be discussed today for as long as I so choose that it's going to be discussed, because we are well aware of how long our meetings can take if I don't get answers to my questions. And if people want to just sit here and dance around the subject, I don't like that. I want to hear answers. And if we're not willing to postpone it, and it's yet again another situation where something is brought that day or substantially close to that day without any discussion whatsoever. We did not talk about this in any way. As far as I'm aware, it was not discussed behind closed doors with the full board, or even with the constituency of the board that is not here today. Am I incorrect in that? Were board members Farah and Song aware that this was going to be brought forward today? Has that been discussed in any way?
Mr. Leonard?
So there have, again, I'm not going to give you conversations in executive session.
Yeah.
And so there have been conversations related to this resolution about the provision, about the repeal, in which all board members, with the exception of yourself, have been present for. And so that has been an ongoing conversation in executive session for months.
Okay. I guess I'm surprised to hear that, considering, we're bringing it up today, and I don't, again, we aren't allowing the public to digest it. We aren't giving them time to discuss it themselves, to bring their questions. This is a last-minute add to another meeting of ours where they don't get to have a say in any way, and that is so unfortunate. It is so unfortunate that this board feels that our public does not deserve the right to hear about the things that we decide before we decide them. Like, the same day, this is as bad as it's gotten. Like,
I just want to make sure what you're saying is that the community has not had an opportunity to weigh in on 1669?
on the repeal of 1669, yes.
Okay.
Am I wrong? Like, as far as I understand it, this has not been brought up to anyone outside of this board in our legal counsel.
It just feels like we've been talking about 1669 for a very long time.
We haven't discussed it since March 27th. Yes, I remember the date. February 28th was the date that it was passed. January 10th was the day that it was started. January 3rd was the first time I had heard anything about it. And that was not an executive session. That was completely separate. So, yeah, I remember exactly when this was discussed, and I haven't really discussed it since then, other than occasionally bringing it up at one point or another. And other than that, I have left it alone, as I was suggested to.
I'm sorry, the comment was about the community, and the community's had ample opportunity to be able to read it, comment on it, ask questions about it.
Oh, I know. It was the reason that yourself and our superintendent had a vote of no confidence. It was one of the reasons given. I mean, that's super unfortunate. I'm getting no reasons why we're doing this at this moment and why we are not including the rest of our board in that decision. It seems, like many things, haphazardly done, and I don't know why. I don't understand why we do the things that we do and the way that we do them. This resolution was a terrible idea from the beginning, in my opinion. And yes, I feel some vindication of it being repealed, but my concern of it being just brought up in January because we're discussing labor negotiations again, that's a serious concern, and it's not being addressed in any way. Like, we aren't even suggesting that we look into why this was passed in the first place, why it was brought, who brought it, when that was first discussed, all of those things, none of it is being talked about. We're talking about
I actually
repealing
believe
it.
that question has been asked and answered, that this would not be the form, that would be done in executive session. And
But
that
if
I
this
think
is
it
repealed,
was-
there's no more discussion with that, correct? I mean, there's no more.
So 2 responses to that.
Yes.
One would be that there is the potentiality for an appeal on this, as you noted. And so the board would still have the ability to convene an executive session under that RCW for executive sessions for pending litigation, because this is still potentially active litigation.
Mm-hmm.
There could be other claims associated with it. So in that sense, generally, if there were conversations about the future, there are ways that the board can convene in executive session to talk about potential litigation, even if the matter isn't active, because it could result in litigation or pending litigation. So those conversations can occur with some exceptions, with some guidelines in executive session, because there's advice given, because there's litigation that is occurring. And so those conversations, as expressed by President Margell, would occur and have occurred in an executive session on a routine and regular basis, because it's pending litigation. That's occurred with general counsel, that's occurred with outside counsel, and all of these conversations that you're referring to, our strategy, are pursuant to litigation and are in closed executive sessions.
Okay. I just, can I ask our board why you feel that my legal fees that I've spent trying to remove this from our policies and resolutions and everything, why I do not deserve to have those reimbursed? Like, why is that?
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I will start with Mr. Leonard on this one.
So again, I will only state that you know, the district does not represent individual board members in their individual capacity. And so while legal is extended to boards and directors in their official capacity as members of the board and the collective, if there's actions that are taken in the individual capacity, there's no coverage. And so that doesn't mean that a board member can't seek legal action against the district, but that does not create an attorney-client privileged relationship, because board director can't represent both the board in a collective and also an individual. And that information I've shared through WASDA and through recommendations as to kind of ethical obligations associated with it. And so therefore, when an individual board member has a claim, the only way that provision of attorney's fees happens is if there is a settlement agreement that states as such, or where there's a prevailing party, and certain types of issues can have a attorney-client privileged, or sorry, an attorney provision that allows for the collection of attorney's fees. In this case, none of those apply.
Okay, so here's another question on 1669. Say I completely had ignored it and chose not to follow it whatsoever. The actions that the board could take against me for doing so, would those be the same as the actions that could be taken against me, like, or any other board member, if they choose to just ignore whatever's happening based on someone's contract or something along those lines? It could be brought against me. Someone could bring a lawsuit against me, but the district would then be required to defend me as a board member, correct? Like, if I do some sort of act, let's do something completely separate. Today, I visited 7 of our elementary schools. If our board were to pass a resolution saying that a board member is not allowed to go in elementary schools without a chaperone from anyone, whatever, we pass that resolution. I ignore it and go to the school anyway, and they decide to sue me. Is the district required to defend me in that action?
It really depends.
I'm sorry, I would advise our attorney not to answer in hypotheticals.
That's fair. That's fair. I will just say this. If we have questions about coverage or when you are, generally speaking, it will depend on a number of factors which we can talk about, some of which are codified in insurance agreements. It depends upon whether you're in the scope of your duties, and it will depend. And I agree with President Margell. It's hard for me just to respond to hypothetical situations that aren't really real. And so I will say there's many factors. I will be happy to sit down with you at a future date and talk through some of those examples of where someone is in fact within the scope of their responsibilities and when they are not in the scope, and we can have further conversations about that at a future date for sure.
I'm flabbergasted at this. Like this, it makes absolutely no sense that this was passed in the first place. It obviously didn't have the effect that was wanted, which I don't know, whatever that was, but it didn't have the effect that was intended. And now we're removing it. We aren't admitting fault in any way. We're not admitting that this shouldn't have been done in the first place. No one's willing to even say that. No one's willing to say why it was begun, what I did that caused it to begin, what I could have done to avoid it. I'm not being provided any information whatsoever, and every time I ask any question of you refer to our lawyer. And then I ask him a question, and it again is just, we can talk about this in some other fashion. And this is why people don't trust us. I mean, this is exactly why we don't pass bonds and levies. Like, this goes to the core of what I see going on here, is that we are constantly bringing things up at the very last minute and saying it needs to be done today, because if it doesn't get done today, then I guess the world is gonna fall apart and the sky is gonna fall. But we have that happen constantly, and I've brought that up so many times, and yet we have it again. Why?
That was a very long string of questions and comments, of which I would say many of them are false and incorrect. I would also say that I would refer back to the pleadings and the court documents that were provided, and the judgments, and many of your questions are answered within that. The chair recognizes Director Clark.
With that, I'll call for the questions.
A motion has been made to
Actually,
call
I'm
for the
going to take a
question.
break. Thank
I
you.
second that. A motion has been made and seconded to call for the question. Any discussion? Seeing that there is no discussion, we'll move to calling for the question. Before we do so, I'm going to go ahead and give Director Cook let's go ahead and say 3-minute recess.
That will work. You cannot conduct business without a quorum, and you don't have a quorum.
Okay, can we do a 3-minute recess?
You can certainly call for a recess.
Yes, okay, thank you. On the floor for calling for the question. We'll go ahead and have a roll call vote on this one. Director Cook?
I abstain.
Director Clark? Aye. Aye. The question is called. We have a motion on the floor for approval item 7.06, repeal of resolution 1669. All those, we'll do a roll call vote. Director Cook?
I already did this, but I abstain.
The first vote was for the calling for the question to move and end discussion.
Okay,
This-
I want to say one thing before we move forward on this.
We are actually done with discussion at this time. We've already called for the question and, and we are
Then move
now.
forward.
So there's a motion on the floor for item 7.06, repeal of resolution 1669. Director Cook? Your vote.
Move forward. As you said, you are able to. I don't need to say anything.
We will mark that as an abstention.
I am not saying that. You can decide whatever you would like to put for my vote. Go
We
for
ask,
it.
we ask you to vote your conscience.
I am not saying a thing. You don't want me to discuss anything, so I will wait until I am able to.
Is Mr. Leonard? I don't know what to do with that.
I would treat that as an abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Clark? Aye. My vote is aye. The vote passes 2-0-1. We now move on to item 8.0, the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the floor?
Approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded for approval of consent agenda items 8.01 through 8.06. We are now open for discussion. Seeing as there is none, we have a motion to approve consent agenda items 8.01 through 8.06. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. 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 All those against? All those abstaining? Mr. Leonard?
If a board member is here and is not voting, you count it as an abstention.
Thank you very much for your opinion on that. The motion passes for approval of the consent agenda items 8.01 through 8.06, 2-0-1. Final communication from the audience. I believe that we've made it through all of our audience communication during our earlier section. We now move to 10.02, board reports and discussion. Director Cook?
All right, now that I can actually speak to what I wanted to discuss in my report, I have tried to get this repealed for 10 months. I have tried and failed with this board over and over and over. And when I finally get to the point where I'm able to get this repealed, there is no reason given. There is no information provided. There is no consequences to those who chose to do so, or even an admission that this was the wrong thing to do for our district. I am well and truly disappointed in this board. I have been disappointed many times. This is probably the height of my disappointment with you people. Like, I can't, it drives me crazy. I try my hardest to do what I think is best for this district. I spend tons of my time and effort in doing things the way that I think they should be done and the way that I would want my own elected officials to do them. And I still have these sorts of things happening. It speaks volumes to why people are frustrated with this board and why they continue to look at us and say, why are you so dysfunctional? These are the reasons why. These are why they say these things. And I just don't understand. I could have put some gum into the works with this. If I had just left, that wouldn't have passed. It would have sat for the 2 weeks, which is what I was asking for. But I'm not doing that because it's still the right thing to do. To allow you to do this to me is still the right thing. And I
even though I find this extremely difficult to sit here and have you look at me like I am beneath you in some way, it is beyond frustrating. And because of my own beliefs, I will not do the things that you do to me back to you. And I hope that you understand that and you take that home with you tonight and you sit with this action right now and recognize the wrong that you've caused against a fellow board member that would never do the same to you. Never. I would never take you out of a conversation, not once. Even if it meant that you were choosing to do something that was bad, I would want your voice there. I would want it there, and I would want you to know that I value it, because I do. This is beyond anything I could have imagined happening at this board. I don't even know what to say. I'm so frustrated. And I'm done. Thank you. Have a good night.
Director Clark?
I did make a school visit since our last board meeting. I went to Lake Young's, and they truly have a wide variety of student services that they offer, and it's a very interesting mix, but it seems to work very well for them. And it's a great school, and I'm happy for them.
Thank you, Director Clark. Can I just get an advisement? Can we continue with the board meeting with just two of us here? Even though no decisions are being made?
It would be appropriate to really end the meeting. I know you have board reports, but at this point, without a quorum here, it really doesn't make any sense to continue forward.
Thank you for your opinion on that. It is 8:10 and we are adjourned.